If you're producing an event this year, this is a conversation you're going to want to stick around for because I am about to interview the director of experience for my favorite marketing conference of all time, Social Media Marketing World. He is going to share some of the thought processes behind how he makes that event such a remarkable experience and how he can help you with your event. Let's jump in. I'm privileged to have our guest today, Phil Mershon, who is the Director of Experience for Social Media Examiner. As a marketer, I attend a lot of events, and you probably attend a lot of events for your industry too. And we can all think about events that we've attended that weren't that great, and maybe some that were fantastic. And for me, as a social media marketer, there's one event that I insist on attending every year. It is a game changer in terms of what I learn and what I experience and who I meet. And so it's really pretty unparalleled in terms of the quality of the experience. And Phil Mershon is, I guess you could say, the architect of that experience. So if you are planning to prepare an event, this will be an instructive conversation because Phil has many years of experience producing events that the attendees rave about. So welcome, Phil. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And let me just qualify that. I think everybody listening is in the experience business in one capacity or another. Even in a conversation that you're having, there is an experience that you're creating when you host a dinner, when you plan a meeting, but particularly when you're planning a longer event like, a seminar, a workshop, a conference, a concert, anything that you plan, there is an experience to be created, and we all get to play a part in that. And sometimes we don't think about it carefully enough. You and I both create lots of webinars, right? Online events. I don't always think about those the same way that I do social media marketing world. So anyway, I want to create context. I think everybody listening has something that they can think about as an experience that they create that maybe they can rethink after this conversation.
Wow, that's a great paradigm shift, actually. I remember Seth Godin saying something about like basically everything you do is a marketing decision. That's a rough paraphrase, but like the way that you talk to your kids, the way that you treat your guests at a dinner party, it's all a marketing decision. It's how you want to project yourself. And so that's might seem kind of calloused and business-like way to think about it, but it's really not. It's really practical. Like, how can I use this? How can I use every interaction to make an impact? And hopefully, we want to choose to make an impact that provides a service and provides value to other people. And so we have to go into that mindset and be specific about it. So,
Absolutely. Well, and maybe saying it just slightly different than Seth, every situation you're in, you're trying to sell an idea. And in a way, you could say that is marketing. So you have ideas, and I'm an idea guy. I'm not a salesperson. But I had a coach tell me this week, he said, Phil, you're still in the game of marketing. You are always trying to convince someone that your idea is worth pursuing, or you're willing to take consideration and modify it, but you're always in the business. And so, in a very similar way, we're trying to create experiences for people, and we want them to remember it. They want them to remember us. We want them to feel like, hey, I am here. I am with you right now. I'm not anywhere else. And when someone does that, that grabs your attention, says, wow, he really is right here. There is nothing else going on. And he cares about what I have to say. Just in that one-on-one conversation, you can make a huge impact on someone. My friend Amber did that for me one time when I showed up for just a one-on-one meeting, first time to meet her. She had cleared her desk. There was nothing distracting in her room. And when I logged in, she was locked in. And it wasn't like an awkward thing. It was you could feel like she was really there for me. And she's a big deal. Like, she worked with a lot of really famous New York Times best-selling authors. And this was a few years back when I felt like I didn't have much to offer. I didn't have a book or anything. Just someone said, hey, you ought to meet Amber. And she knew that I worked with social media marketing world. So she at least had that. But when I showed up, I felt like, wow, I better show up. Right.
oh, for sure. Yeah. So you were meeting with someone that you felt had an advantage over you, but she took the time to give you her undivided attention and treat it as the valued conversation that it was.
Exactly. And I think if you take that and multiply it by 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 or however many people are coming to your event, you want to give them that feeling. They walk in the door to your dinner party. They walk through the door to your 100-person workshop. They walk through the door to a 2,000-person event. You want them to feel like they are valued, they are treasured, they belong. Like you see them, you know what's going on. You understand when somebody's having a bad day and you try to make it better. You celebrate the people who are coming back, like you, Summer. You know, when you've been coming back for year after year, we see you and say, welcome back. And we say, welcome to the person who's coming the first time. And we try to escort them into the experience and help them enjoy it to the best of our ability, to the degree they're willing to let us. I talked to a lady this week who her boss didn't want to talk to anybody at the conference. And she said, I think I barely met one or two people because my boss didn't want to meet anybody. We went to the sessions, we learned, but we were nose to the grindstone, just learning, 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 not really wanting to meet people. But she said, I still felt welcome, just didn't take advantage. So we want to create that kind of experience. And I think we all can do that at the events we create. It requires, this is one of the things that requires Summers thinking ahead of what is that experience like. So, you know, if we want to take a very common example of a dinner party, you've invited 10 friends to come over to your house for dinner. What
Mm.
is that experience like? And so let's say it's a more formal dinner, not an informal thing, and you've sent an invitation out to them. So the party starts with that invitation and they call back to RSVP. Now you've set an expectation because you've asked for an RSVP, right? This isn't just, hey, come on over for pizza. We're going to watch the game and have some beers. This is, oh, this is a dinner party. People are maybe dressing up a little bit. Maybe the invitation looks a little bit fancy. You've set a tone. All right. So if that person feels like from that invitation, like, oh, this is a big deal, and they show up and I'm wearing my t-shirt and I'm wearing jeans and I've got a beer in my hand, they're like, well, that's a mismatch of what I was expecting. But if they show up and I've got maybe not a coat and tie, but I've got a coat on and an open collared shirt and I offer them some champagne, I've set a tone, right? Right from the beginning. Maybe there's someone outside directing parking because 10 cars can't fit in your driveway and someone's actually out there. Like you're setting a tone from even before they walk through the door. And the way that you start the conversation and say, Summer, hey, it's so good to see you. I've been wanting to introduce you to James. James here is also a digital marketing agency owner, and he's been doing some really cool things with agriculture companies that I thought you would love to learn about. Can I introduce you to him? And then all of a sudden, I've made a handoff, and I don't, that's a fictitious example, but maybe I've given you something intriguing about why I think you and James should have a conversation. And if I have a host have thought about that in advance, and I'm making all these connections for why you want to meet the different people in the room, then when we sit down at the table, everyone feels like they belong. And then we can have a deeper, richer conversation. Now multiply that thought process to how many people you have. You're thinking through, how do I welcome people in? How do I bring them into the community? How do I set up the conversation we're going to have at the table? And the table might be a classroom, it might be a conference center or whatever. I'm thinking through, how do I walk people into the experience and keep them walking in and choosing to enter into it deeper and deeper. And that's the way that I think about it, no matter what kind of experience that I'm creating. I did it for years and years doing worship services at churches. Same process of thought, different logistics.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but it does really apply to everything. And one thing that occurred to me when you were explaining that, especially the example of introducing your guests, is I think for myself, when I'm thinking about planning an event or creating an experience for people, I would default to spending the majority of the time thinking about, the content of the experience, like whether it's making a fancy meal or whether it's the content of the workshop that I'm putting together. And so doing the work of setting up an experience and not just an event, there's just as much pre-work as there is work during the event. I would think. What do you think of, does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think most of us, and this is true of me too, especially earlier in my career, you focus on the things that people came for. They came for the meal. You better cook a really nice meal. But if you also advertise you're coming for a meal, and let's say there's a special guest, maybe we got some important person to come, or you've advertised, as I know this is becoming popular recently, of just meaningful conversation. Maybe the topic of conversation is going to be, I don't know, the arts, but people know why they came, what was put on the invitation, what was put on the registration page for why they signed up, why they paid, or why they agreed to come, or whatever it is. You should put a lot of attention into those things, because if that's not good, it doesn't matter how well you did at greeting them in the parking lot or welcoming them at the front door or introducing them to people. If there's a letdown at the level of when they come for why they came, then the rest of the evening is going to be considered a waste. So you got to do that. But that's not enough. That's not enough. And you want, if you have a speaker, you want them to prepare as well as possible. But the speaker who has a great talk and you haven't prepared the audience for that talk, then it's not going to be as effective. So the music you choose, the ambiance of the room, the colors, the decorations, the atmosphere that you've created, the culture of the event that you've responded about in terms of like social media marketing world, that sets an expectation and a tone of, oh, these people understand me. These people are here to serve me. These people are also really trying to understand and grow in social media marketing. This is a hungry crowd. I can have conversations about anything. That creates a different kind of anticipation when you walk into a room to learn about the latest changes in Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever the topic might be.
Right. Setting the tone, and with it, in the case of social media marketing world, I know as an attendee, it's the energy amps up as soon as you walk through the doors of the convention center. There's live music, perhaps, or there's music anyway, high energy music. Sometimes you're greeted with a live musician wandering the halls. Lots of greeters, enthusiastic people telling you where to go, walking you to the registration table. It's an experience that just draws you in immediately. So you get people on the right track immediately, and then they are in the mood to learn, I guess. I'm curious, as someone who I looked at social media marketing world from a distance for many years before I was able to actually make it. And then when I first attended, it was everything I expected to be. But I'm curious, how did you come about creating the experience? Because a lot of people, even speakers, attendees, a lot of people rave about the event. How did you go about building that to turn into the experience that it's known for? Well, how did that start?
I mean, it's a lot of little decisions that were made along the way. And certainly we didn't have it perfect the first year. But I think one thing we had going for us the first year is that there was no event on the planet for social media marketers in 2013. There were small little events. There were events where social media was a subtopic, whether it was a blog world or a content marketing world or an inbound or some other event that existed. None of them were pure play social media marketing events. So as we had built an audience, we had a crowd that was hungry to meet together to talk. And, in those days, you could say it was the Wild West, so nobody knew what was really working. Everybody was wanting to figure it out and learn. So there was a hunger, but there was also an openness. And I think a lot of what has created the culture that we have is the staff and the speakers. So we very specifically brought in speakers who have an open mindset of they're willing to talk to anybody. They don't just come in and drop their knowledge bomb and leave as quickly as they can, but instead they come and stay. And if they can, they'll stay for 3 days and they'll talk to anybody. They're busy, but they're approachable. So we wanted people who are approachable. And that was true of our staff as well. And so I think the culture was established pretty early on because we were attracting those kinds of people. It wasn't until a year two or year three that we started having our volunteer army, but I think it was even year two. Year one, we had some volunteers who just came forward at the last minute, which we were really thankful for, and we had staff. I think it was year two, we said, you know what, we need some extra help. And we've got a lot of people who are saying to us behind the scenes, I would love to come to your conference. I can't afford to come. Do you have any options? We don't do discounts like that. So, but we did say, hey, if you're interested in coming and volunteering, we do have a need for a volunteer army. And so we started seeing people raise their hands, and some of them just loved to volunteer, so much so that they preferred volunteering versus being a paid attendee because they liked being behind the scenes. They liked serving others. They knew they could get the content to watch later in recordings. So I think the quality of the staff, we didn't just go hire generic event staff. And I don't want to say generic in a bad way, because these are great people who are in the hospitality industry, but the level of care for your event for a professional event staff, we'll call them that, is different than someone who is a social media marketer who raised their hand and said, hey, these are my people. These are my, this is my tribe. I want to make sure this event is great. They have a different level of care. They may not have all the skills that that professional event staff person had, but the level of care more than made up for it. And so I think those are a couple of things. And we made a lot of strategic decisions over the years that set the culture. You know, we've increased the length of breaks between sessions because we wanted more time for talking. From year one, we baked networking into the event. We called everything networking because we wanted to advertise and subliminally say networking is important. We know you're paying for the content. We know you are coming for the content, but we also believe in helping people make meaningful connections. And so we designed the event with that in mind. And so whether it's a party, a break, an activity, or even people who are on staff who their job is to help you make connections. And I think you've done that. I forget. I feel like you've been part of that team. Yeah. So I think those are some of the things that have helped to create that culture over time. And then we look at the data and say, what can we do better? Which every year's, it's not like this even every year we're getting better and better and better. You know, the C.S. Lewis onward and upward. Well, we've had some onward and downwards and then some upwards because we don't get it right every year. And we always have to learn because things change and people change. And, you know, the pandemic definitely threw a curveball at us, and we're learning how to do events post pandemic and all that. But I think still that overall culture is there, and that's one of the things people appreciate about it.
I agree 100%. And you were telling the story of a gal that you were talking to who said their boss just kept their heads down and just learned, and they didn't focus on the networking. And that was me the first year that I went to social media marketing world. I learned a ton, but it was kind of lonely. I went by myself, and I was just too insecure to talk to people. And
Mm.
then I decided when I returned after the virtual year, when I returned in person in 2022, the one of the other things that I find very useful about social media marketing world is that there's a Facebook group ahead of time where you can connect with people. And I saw all these people talking about how you need to network, network, network. And I was like, oh, I failed at that a couple of years ago, so I'm going to rectify that. And so I got really active in the chat. I made some plans to meet up with people before I even met them, and I ended up making a group of friends and that I hung out with during the conference. And it took it from an excellent experience and learning, but to an experience of like, now I have my people. I have
Mm.
people to sit with at sessions, and it
Right.
makes a huge difference to the point that I've stayed in touch with these people. These people are potentially people that I might hire down the road and vice versa. It's the networking, just the value of it cannot be overstated. And so I think that's really awesome that the team at Social Media Examiner has made such a point to bake that into the experience, because who knows how many business relationships and friendships have come out of that conference over the years. It's really fun to think about.
Yeah, I have no idea. And I suppose at one level, we'll never know all of the ripple effects of that. But there's two thoughts that come to mind. One is one of my grad school professors said this to me. He said, Phil, you never know when a 15-minute conversation will change your life. And so when you turn and say hello to someone at a conference or you make those plans pre-event to meet with someone, you don't know when that conversation is going to be the very thing that gives you the thought that changes your mindset. Like, you said at the beginning of this conversation, you got a paradigm shift, even in thinking about the way experiences affect our lives. And that could end up being like this paradigm that changes everything you do. Who knows? I'm not saying it will, but when you go to an event, you never know. So if you don't ever talk to someone, then you're 100% guaranteed not to find that moment. You miss 100% of the swings that you don't take, right? Whatever that adage is. The other thing that's really interesting, Summer, is that this year in 20, a lot of people made the decision that you did 2 years ago. So I saw this happen repeatedly where people said, I was there last year or I was there 2 years ago. And I realized that I just was kind of focused on the content, sticking to myself. And I made a decision that I'm going to show up and I'm going to network and I'm going to put myself in uncomfortable circumstances. And many of them are self professed introverts. And it's the wrong use of the word introvert because introvert has way more to do with where your energy comes from than it does with how socially outgoing you are. But we do associate it with that. So we'll go ahead and use the word. Many of them said, I'm introverted, I'm shy, but I know this is important. So I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do the hard thing. And they all said after the event, they were so glad they did because of the connections that they made. And one of them even was telling me a story of how she went to one of the meetups that we had. And it got awkward for her at one moment because it's one of these where they shuffle you from table to table, every few minutes. And she ended up at a table where her table mates decided to get up and leave, and she was the only one left. And she said to herself, this would be a good chance to leave because I don't feel very comfortable right now. But I made a decision. I'm going to do the uncomfortable and I'm going to stick it out. So she did. And she was really glad she did because she ended up speaking to one of the leaders at the conference and having some really good conversations. And several others had that. And I think my point there is I, as an event organizer, you, as an event organizer, can do all that you can to help people meet each other, but you need to set the tone for others to make the decision to reciprocate. So, and even invite them to do so. So, hey, you're coming to this event and you're coming and you know that making some connections is important to you. There's some really amazing people here, and you can even describe them and say, look, these are experienced marketers, these are experienced engineers, these are experienced whatevers. And there are people that work for amazing companies like Apple, and there's people who've started their own business and they're entrepreneurs and they're self-made, and there's all these people here. I can pretty much guarantee you there's someone here that you would get great value out of meeting. Here's some of the ways that we've made it possible for you to do that. And if you're finding it challenging, we've got this Facebook group, we've got a team of people who are here to help you. Just reach out. We're here for you, but you can create your own plan. Here's how. Like, so you can see right there, I'm trying to help you help yourself, but I'm also trying to be available to help you if you need the help. Because it comes down to I can set the table. You have to decide to sit down and eat. Right. And so
Hates
you have to
that.
decide, are you going to join in that conversation at the dinner table? Or are you just going to listen to everybody else talk? And so a great host is going to invite you into the conversation and draw you in, but you still have a choice. Are you going to keep showing up or are you going to sit back and wait? Because, maybe you're intimidated. I don't belong. I'm an imposter here. Well, if you came to this conference, you belong. Like you've already decided you belong. You need to learn about this stuff. And the only way you learn is if you show up and start asking questions. And maybe you're completely in a learner's posture to begin with.
Sure. Yeah, providing the tools for people when they decide to sit down at the table is something that is a great benefit of social media marketing world. And you've talked about how you've done that in your book, Unforgettable.
You mean this one?
The art, that one. Yeah, that's the one. Me as a raving fan of social media marketing world, this is the recipes are all in there and we've talked about it a lot. My wheels are turning too as someone who has put together events in the past and will be doing so in the future and like how I can go out and make them do some pre-thought to make sure that my guests have the best experience possible. And so I guess, is there a quick little piece of advice that you could give to someone who is planning an event to delight people they know? Just like your top tip.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that I would say. The biggest one is something we've already started hinting at, which is make a diagram or a flow chart or something that walks through the major steps of somebody's experience and ask yourself at each step of the way, what could go wrong? And how can I plan in advance to make sure that doesn't go wrong? But then the flip side of it is, how can I make it go really right? Or how can I go above and beyond? How can I make that a surprise and delight moment? So if you do some of that pre-planning and just kind of chart out the 6 or 7 steps of the experience, whatever the number is, depending on the length of the event and the complexity, it's more steps, but there's still significant moments that you can create. And then another one is take on the mindset of what Andy Stanley talks about. I call this the snowball effect. I don't think he called that, but it's do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So if you go into the experience and have this mindset that, hey, I'm going to make somebody's day today, at this party, at this event, at this workshop, whatever it is. And if you've trained your staff to think that way too, then you're going to start making experiences just because you've empowered people to think outside the box and create moments. And that might be making an introduction. It might be when they spill the spaghetti sauce on their white shirt. You don't just go help them clean it up. You go and find one of Summer's white shirts in the closet and give it to her. Or, I don't know what the solution is, but you've thought about it in advance. Like, okay, it's spaghetti. There's a good chance someone's going to spill sauce on them. What are we going to do? You've thought about it. So you already know what you're going to do. Maybe you've got a preventative plan of, hey, we're going to actually say it's okay to drape the napkins around your neck if you don't want to spill spaghetti, and we'll just all have fun with it or whatever, right? So you've thought ahead of how you're going to solve those things. And then you've also thought ahead of how can we make some really memorable moments. That's probably my number one tip is thinking ahead like that and planning. That's going to open up the door for all kinds of creative thoughts about things you can and can't do, and your budget and your time, and all those things will affect the choices you make along the way. But ultimately, you're picturing this person. And that'd probably be the other thought here is get as clear as you can on who are the people coming. Small dinner party, you can get the faces of all 9 people who are coming to your house, or 8 if it's couples inviting couples. And who are they? What are they going through? What do we know about their lives? How can we make this a really cool experience for them? Large conference, now we're talking marketing, we're talking avatars. Okay, it's the 35-year-old soccer mom, it's the 50-year-old, engineer dad, it's the 20-year-old college student, it's the 70-year-old retiree, it's the, professor who came over from England, whatever. You've got an avatar in mind. Now you're thinking about how are they experiencing this event, and get maybe 3 avatars if it's a large event, 1 avatar if it's a small event, and walk through it and what's different and unique for each one of them as they are coming to your experience. And I think those thoughts right there are going to open up all kinds of ways for you to think about the experience. And there's way more nuance. I'd say the last thing is just like a great vocalist, Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Drake, whoever it is, they have a vocal coach. If you're a great tennis player, you have a tennis coach. If you're in the business of doing events, you should have an event coach. Maybe you need to talk to me.
So hoping you were going to mention that because as you're describing, thinking through the avatars and thinking through what could go wrong and those various scenarios, I was thinking some people, maybe marketers, are better prepared for that, but someone who's not in marketing, or really anyone who finds that to be daunting and overwhelming, that could be stifling. And so to have someone like you come in that has done this, that has led world-class conferences that people come back to every year, you could offer a lot of value in helping and walking people through these processes that you have put into place for your organization.
I would be honored to do that. I would say, even if you don't bring me in, if you're not a marketer, talk to someone who is in marketing for your company. They will be able to help you picture who that person is. That's the best advice I will give. We're going to get the data from your marketing team and figure out who that person is, and then start to imagine what is their life like as they come in. And that's going to open up all kinds of possibilities of the experiences that we create. An event for predominantly women who are in their 30s and 40s looks very different than an event that's for men who are in their 40s and 50s. And it's going to affect the music. It's going to affect the gifts that sponsors have. It's going to affect the colors that we choose. It's going to affect the culture that we're trying to create. It might even affect the staff that we hire. There's a lot of implications if you understand your differences of events based on who you know is coming and who you're attracting.
Oh, for sure. And is that identifying those avatars and how that affects the planning? Is that part of your coaching service as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the steps along the way.
Fantastic. So you're, just to close us out, you're eager to help. Who is it that you're eager to help? Just to, in your own words.
If you run an event and need a coach, then let's talk.
Simple enough.
Yeah. And if you would love to get a sample of my book, go to philmershon.com/bonus, and you'll get the chapter that wasn't included in the book because it was written after I sent it to the publisher. But it's all about how to build community at an event. And you can get it for free. Just go to that site, drop your email in. If you don't want to keep hearing from me, you can always unsubscribe, but you'll get that free chapter.
I didn't realize that chapter wasn't in the book. I'll have to download it now.
You will.
Even as an owner of the book.
You
Yeah.
will. Yeah.
Good. Good
Hey,
deal.
Summer, can I close this out with a closing moment?
Please.
All right. So I love to end things with what I call a signature sign off. And if you're a speaker, you could actually emulate this, although you probably won't do it the way that I will. But Summer, real quick, give me 2 or 3 words that summarize what you're going to take away from this conversation and just really rapid fire.
Serving, kindness, and forethought.
All right. I'm going to play a quick musical closeout for the remaining seconds that we have.